Welcome back to Life and Stride podcast. This is episode 265. On this episode, we had Zach Bitter on the podcast. Zach is a ultra running legend. He has set world records for the 100-mile and 12-hour run. On this episode, we talked about his illustrious career. We talked about fueling, recovery, his training for ultra marathons, and a lot more. So if you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review, drop a comment, share with a friend. We'll catch you on 266. When we're running through Norton Commons or the Pewee Valley area in Louisville, Kentucky, it's pretty easy to spot Mason Construction Home. The attention to detail, the quality, the stunning design, you can't miss it. It stands out. We aren't just saying that either. Our own co-host Scotty trusted Mason Construction to build his forever home, and he and his family couldn't be happier. Don't tell Scotty this, but we're at his house a lot because we love the home. He's all right too, though. If you live in the Louisville or Southern Indiana area and are thinking about building your forever home or doing a remodel, there is nobody else to trust with this project than Mason Construction. The link to their website is in our show notes. Click on the request information option and start the conversation about what your forever home could look like.
Go ahead, dude. It's your
Yeah, let
podcast.
me paint
Take
it.
it
All
away.
right, Zach, let me paint this picture for you. All right, so like 3 hours ago, I'm a dad of three. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old, right? It's the witching hour. My wife is cooking dinner. On the island, I am taking apart like a 2017 MacBook Pro. It's a Mac Daddy computer, but the battery on it is trash. You like basically have to have it plugged in for it to work. So I got a new computer, but that computer is like my wife's computer now and the kids for school and stuff. So my dad was like, yeah, you should just get a new battery and you can just install it yourself. I did it on one and it wasn't that hard. Come to find out, well, all three of my kids are hungry and they're climbing on the island. And I am watching this 20-minute YouTube video of how to remove a MacBook Pro battery. There's like 35 screws that are so small you can barely see them. They're literally a millimeter in length. And you have to have all these like tiny little screwdrivers. And my kids are trying to take the screws. It was like I was sweating bullets. It took me an hour and a half. I had to pry off the old battery with a butter knife.
Did you fix it?
Dude, the
He's on it now.
process ends with like you like put it all together and it like went together. Actually, I was surprised I got it together, but then you have to plug it in until it's fully charged. So you have to like overcharge it. And then you have to turn it on for 2 hours and then you have to drain it fully. And then you have to let it be drained for 5 hours and then charge it fully. And apparently it worked. So I'm in like stage 1 of the charging process, but that's where I was 3 hours ago, Zach. Zero relation to this podcast or running, but how's your day
Focus,
been, man?
preservation, that all works into it, right?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, you know. And confidence, honestly, confidence is key with half of what you do. And if you don't have confidence going into something like that, oh man, it's rough. It's rough. But dude, Zach, thanks for coming on the pod. Appreciate your willingness to come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, how are you?
Good. Yeah, doing well. So can't complain.
Yeah, I asked you right before the podcast. I said I don't want to embarrass myself. And I said, do you currently still hold the American record for the 100-mile? And your answer was the American record. And you said, yes. So let's just start there, dive in. We can backtrack if we need to, but where did you set that? And how did that go?
Yeah. So I set that in 2019. It was at the Olympic Training Facility in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's like an indoor speed skating rink that they use for, I suppose, training for the Olympics, but they built like this 443-meter indoor track around it. So kind of have this relatively monotonous but very controllable environment to do an ultra marathon once per year when they do this event that's called 6 Days in the Dome. So I went there and decided to try to run 100 miles that day on it and ran 11:19:13. It was the world record at the time that got broken about a year and a half after that, but the American record side of it is still sitting there.
That's
Okay.
awesome. Was it the same race that you broke the 12-hour record too?
Yeah. So it's kind of this interesting thing with ultra running. You have like the distance events and then you have these timed events where you see how
Yeah.
far you can get. So
Yeah.
with finishing under 12 hours, I was incentivized to keep going as best I could for another 41 minutes to see how far I could get. I think it was 104.88 is what I ended up with for the 12-hour split.
Yeah. That and what's the pace for that?
It's 647.5 for the 100.
Brother.
And let me make sure I heard this correctly. You did that indoor on a
Yeah.
440-meter track.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it banked or is it flat?
It's flat. Yeah. It's actually, I think it's actually kind of the straightaways are a little longer than the turns. So it's kind of like an interesting setup, but it gets that same kind of play as a basic outdoor track for the most part, which I've had 500 milers where I've gone under 12 hours, and 4 of them have been on track surfaces. One of them was on a 2-mile paved loop.
There's so many things that have to be so challenging. There's so many things that could be challenging about a 100-miler, but around a track, are you allowed to switch directions or is it one direction the whole time?
Yeah, they usually, because they've got a group of people out there usually doing just a variety of different events on the day. And what they do is they switch everyone every 4 hours. So whether you're doing 100 miles like me or this particular event, you could go up to 6 days and see how far you could get in 6 days. So, if you're doing that, you definitely want to be switching directions. I could probably tolerate one direction for 12 hours if I had to, but if it was 6 days, I would be looking for some sort of change, I would imagine.
Yeah, no doubt. So do you get to go 6 days and like take a 8-hour nap in between each day?
You
Or
can, yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting how people structure it. I want to say, it ranges from people will sleep for like a few hours during that 6 days to some people will sleep a little bit more. I had Meg Eckert on who just set the women's record for that. She ran 600 miles, which is insane. I don't think she slept much though. I think she slept very little during that time. I'd have to go back and look exactly what it was. I remember thinking there's no way I'd be able to tolerate the amount of less or loss of sleep as she did.
Zach, what do you think the optimal strategy for that event would be?
For 6 days?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're gonna need to sleep, but the question is just how much. We don't have great research to suggest one way or the other in terms of like how much is enough, but we do know that based on some cycling studies that some is probably going to improve performance. So the way I would probably do it is I wouldn't force myself to sleep at any specific time, but I would kind of wait until that sleep pressure kind of came in, and then I would try to sleep for a little bit. I think the way it's described to me, I haven't done anything like super long like that, so I talk to a lot of people who have, and I just try to learn from them for the most part. But usually the way it's described to me is like you kind of have a similar setup where like you would imagine if you can lie down and take like a 90-minute nap, you're going to get like a full sleep cycle and you feel like pretty good after that for a fairly long period of time. But you can also just lay down and take like these really short naps that when you wake up, like as short as like a minute or two, and you wake up feeling like pretty refreshed, but I guess that fades really quick. So if you try to do like really short naps, like, up to 15 minutes or so, you're probably going to find that the impact from them doesn't last very long. Whereas if you have some strategic, like 90-minute ones, that might actually end up being better for your average pace over that your actual total pace versus moving pace.
Yeah, because that's the balance, right? Of how fast can you rip after X amount of sleep. And that's what it comes down to is like, if you can go and run 11 and a half hours, in 100 miles in 11 and a half hours after 8 hours of sleep, like every day, then you would probably do that as your strategy, but you're going to be absolutely torched after you do that for one day. So
where it gets really interesting, there's these backyard ultras that are getting really popular now where you do this like 4.2 mile loop every hour until one person's left. And when I first saw those come out, I was like, oh, that's really interesting because it really removes the speed component where you're not really incentivized to go much faster than you need to in that. So now all of a sudden you have someone that's got like a great VO2 max or pace at VO2 max and lactate threshold and all these things, but durability and sleep deprivation and just probably stubbornness, or variables that are almost just as big at that point. And then I had a couple of guys who've run the furthest, and then they're pushing into like almost 5 days now. And they told me,
Phil Gore.
yeah, yep, yeah. Yeah, he's an interesting dude, but he told me, like, the strategy is, like, you do wanna run a little bit faster on some laps so you can take these, like, 10, 15-minute
Yeah.
naps, and that's what allows you to push on into those, like, 4th and nearly 5th day. So his strategy is, like, during the day, he'll run slower and just cut it a little bit closer and just make sure he's taking care of giving himself just enough time to take care of himself between laps. But then at night, when he'd be more likely to be sleeping in a normal situation, he'll run faster loops, like 40 minutes, and then try to quick take, like, almost a 10, 15-minute nap every time. So then over the course of, like, an 8 to 10-hour night phase, he might bank a couple hours of sleep, and then being able to do that every night allows him to kinda stretch it out. And I was like, "Oh, okay, so there might actually be a little bit of a faster running component to this if you gotta be doing that."
Yeah.
Well, yeah, dude, and each course is completely different as well.
Mhm.
Sometimes you get, like, heavier trail, harder terrain, hills,
Yep.
heat, and then night, like, you get heat, like, cool, heat, cool.
Mhm.
Phil is definitely an interesting guy. We had him on, I think it was right after his world record
Yeah.
he did, when he did 800, I think it was 800K, 500 miles. It was, like, on the
Mhm.
dot, right?
Yeah.
100 something laps, 119 laps or something.
Mhm.
But one interesting thing about that event is you can only go as far as your partner can
Yeah.
take you. The last person, right? You can only go as far. So who knows? I
Mhm.
wish they would let the last person keep going, you
Yeah.
know? But it's essentially, that last finisher is the last man standing. And Phil, I asked him straight up, I remember I was like, obviously coulda, shoulda, woulda, but how far could you have gone? He was like, I mean, I felt pretty fresh on day
Yeah.
5, so I'm like, "What?" He was like, "I feel like I coulda gone at least another day or 2 easily until stuff started to get weird." I was like, "Alright." I mean,
Yeah.
at that point, do you think somebody like that is just genetically gifted, or do you think he's just good at strategy?
Yeah, it's really interesting because with those events right now, I would call guys like him and Sam Harvey, like, they're kinda trailblazers, so they're really figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So, I think that's gonna be real that w they're solving a lot, they're answering a lot of questions, so then when we get more competitive pressure in that and we can have
Yeah.
people push, like, a couple days or more beyond what those guys are doing now, a lot of it's gonna be because of the amount of time and attention they put into just refining it. Uh, so, like, yeah, I don't know what makes a great backyard runner. I mean, there's definitely different variables than just straight up running. Uh, like what I do for 100 miles, I'm stopping for, like, when I broke the world record, I stopped for, I think, maybe 3 minutes total for a few bathroom breaks, and that was it.
Wow.
So, like, there's a component of that with just, like, running efficiency where that becomes important. But for something like these backyards, I gotta think, like, durability is a huge piece because when you think of the when when Sam and, Phil ran that race where Phil broke the world record, Sam had an injury that pulled him out of that. Like, that's really
Yeah.
what sidelined him. So, I mean, that was the variable that mattered on that particular day. So, I think there's that. I think there's probably, like, a component of just being able to stay on top of, like, fluid and hydration and knowing what you're doing there, knowing your body there. The sleep component, like we said. Um, there's gotta be some sort of mental, just, like, I don't know what we would call it, just where just, like, where you can just kinda keep wanting it after that amount of time and not kinda
Mm.
cave to that pressure just to stop and seek comfort that goes maybe a little bit beyond what you would normally see, or it's a different type of mental battle, I would imagine, where, like, the pressure probably doesn't feel sharp the way it does when you're, like, redlining at the end of a 5K, but it's just this really constant low grade discomfort that you have to tolerate for an indefinite amount of time and stay motivated. Um, yeah, it's wild stuff.
Dude, Phil in that race, his last lap was his fastest lap. It was like
Oh, I forgot
7:36.
about
Oh,
that.
you did? Okay, it was
I
ridiculous.
forgot.
Dude, we had him on the pod and he said that, and I was like, "There's no way. Like, how on earth did you do that as your last lap?" So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that's such
know.
a
Yeah.
flex too, man. That is such a flex.
It's
yeah,
like
to
letting
come and do it
everyone
after
know
that.
if you do find me at one of these down the road, just know we're going into day 6, day 7.
I know.
Yeah,
You
for
know
sure.
what's interesting? Some of the I don't know if you know Charlie Lawrence.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you know that name. He's a character. Obviously, we had him on the podcast in the early days of the pod.
He just ran the New York City half, by the way. We were talking to John Green last pod, and he was up there with Rory. He's his coach. And I saw a picture. I was like, is that Charlie Lawrence back there? Charlie Lawrence
Yeah.
just ripped like a 64-minute half in New York, which is a
Yeah.
hard course. And oh, by the way, set the was the 50-mile world record down in Illinois like a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got the
Hill, yeah.
50-mile world record and the 100K American record right now. So he's really been kind of refining those like sub 100-mile ultras right now, which is kind of cool to see.
Talk about range, man. That's awesome.
Was it the backyard ultra, Danny or Chris, that he was smack talking, that he said that he like, give me anybody in 50K and I'll beat anybody. And I love his confidence, and he's just got an aura, but he's not beating Phil. I'm sorry. He's not beating Phil. I mean, I would bet real money. I'm not a gambler, but I would bet. I'd put a lot of money on that race that Phil's winning.
I want to say, what was it? He was on, what podcast was he on? Was it Run Experience?
Running Effect.
Running Effect. I'm sorry, Running Effect. Yeah. And I can't remember, like, I can't remember how the topic came up, but it kind of came up. I think he was just asked about like what he thought he would do and something like that. And he said, oh, I'd be going for the world record, at least 500 miles. And that ruffled some of the feathers of the guys who are running those events right now, I think.
Because there's such a big difference, right? There's like fast, flat ultras, which is like what he excels at, what Taggart excels at, what you have excelled at, Zach. And then there's like, backyards, which is more of like, I put that in the category of a Moab 250 or even a Cocodona. Like that's its own category to me of like next level ultra that, okay, when the sleep component is involved, like that's a multi-day event where like it's getting, that's a new category to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the part that's really interesting to me is like, if you told me I had to go and try to compete with those guys, I don't think there's like a 0 chance I'd be able to compete with them, but I wouldn't be able to just do it right now. I would have to totally revamp the way I'm preparing, and I'd have to, probably do some stuff that would get me at least in the ballpark of knowing what I'm going to be going through during like day 2 or day 3. So it wouldn't be a drop of the hat, let's go race these guys. It would be like, all right, if we're doing this challenge, we're putting it 8 months down the road.
Yeah. I feel like before a race like that, I'd have to like see some hallucinations in training to just like figure out how to conquer that before I go into the race. Cause that's what I hear. Like Andy Glaze talks about that and stuff. He's like, sees the craziest stuff at mile 200 of like Cocodona. So yeah, I'd have to prepare for that.
I'm not sure just beating people is the motivator there either. I think that can be, I think that can be a motivator, but I think if that's your only desire, like if you really don't have any interest in doing one of those events and your only motivator is to dunk on someone from a challenge standpoint, I think you're going to end up falling short because there are going to be people there that want to be there and they've really just, there's a draw to that type of event for them that's unique. And I think if you don't find that, you're probably going to end up falling short when the variables pile up that are unspecific to just raw fitness and training effect or training fitness and stuff like that.
Yeah. We had a really good conversation with a guy named Mark Dowdle. I don't know if you know who he is.
He's coming on my pod next week.
Oh, cool.
Oh, he's awesome.
Great. He's a really, really good guy. We had an awesome conversation with him in January. But he actually said something very similar to that. He stopped like racing other people and being gung-ho to dunk on people, and he just started racing for himself. That's what he said. He just started, you versus you. People say that all the time. It's cliche, but he's just focusing on his own race. And he said that really transformed how he does backyard stuff. Because I feel like the mental side of things when you're in day 4, you're like, you can only be so competitive against somebody before you just need to focus on your own legs and your own race, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. It's 2026 and you're still buying your running supplies online instead of at your local running store. If you live in the Louisville, Kentucky area, there's nowhere else to buy your running supplies than Ken Combs Running Store on Shelbyville Road. They have everything you need from daily trainers to race day shoes, an assortment of different kinds of fuel, and apparel options. If you're a first-time runner going to get your first pair of running shoes, this is the place to start. They will help you get the perfect type of running shoe for your foot so you're running comfortably and injury-free. If you're a more experienced runner like myself and you want to go somewhere where they're going to have your old faithful running shoe, for me, that's my size 10 Nimbus or size 10 Triumph, I'm always going to Ken Combs for that. If you're looking to get plugged into the local community, Kincombs has a Wednesday track workout for people of all different speeds, and they can also recommend many different groups in the Louisville area. If you're not from Louisville, visit We Run Lou. That's WeRunLou.com. We have a discount code in the show notes, and you can order from Kincombs online and support an amazing local business.
Yeah,
Zach,
yeah.
are you pro? Like, I'm thinking of like Mark Daddle said he started running largely because of Goggins. Are you pro or anti Goggins mentality?
Yeah. I look at Goggins as like he's a very specific, I don't want to say like tool because that's gonna come across as the wrong way, but like
Yeah.
I think Goggins is like that sort of mentality is a lever that you will want to be able to pull at times,
Yeah.
but it's very unique to him. So I think you run into trouble anytime you look at any one person and say, I'm like, that's the process, that's the approach. I think all these people's, whether it's like Goggins or Michael Jordan or anyone who's done incredible things, you got to look at what are the attributes that got them there, and then which of those attributes are going to serve you versus were unique to them that got them to where they got to. So, like with Goggins, I think it's like there are days where I know I just need to like toughen up and go out and push through something or get something done or put in the work because I'm healthy, I'm ready for it, and it's just the slog of it all. And at that point, like the Goggins lever is a great one. I love it. But if it's something where it's like I put in the work I know I need, and now it's like my body's screaming for rest to get the adaptations, I probably don't want to do the whole stare at my sneakers for 30 minutes and force another run.
Yeah. Dude, Zach, you definitely have had to learn some way to pull that like Goggins lever in
Mhm.
your 100 milers. I mean, you said you've 5 times gone under 12 hours, correct?
Yeah.
Did I get that
Mhm.
right? What is your lever? Like, what are you pulling? What are you thinking when it gets hard? Because inevitably at that pace, at that range, it is getting extremely difficult, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, thankfully at this point I've had experience with it, so I know a little bit of the kind of the way these things play out.
Yeah.
And for me, it was really just finding what the real motivator was. Similar to what you talked to Mark about, it was, I first got interested in ultra running because it was like this new kind of exciting thing that was somewhat unexplored. There was a lot of there was a lot less known about it, so you kind of felt like you're helping build something. And like the competition side of things and the record chasing was motivating in the early days. But then I kind of got to a point where I just kind of started thinking like, well, what is the real end goal here? Because like chasing records, even winning races, it's like they're kind of they're only permanent for a little bit of time, especially if it's a record. Someone's going to break it eventually, no matter what. Even if
Yeah.
just innovation alone is going to put someone ahead of you, even if you really stand out. So I kind of was thinking, well, what's the process here that's really going to be internally exciting for me to want to do this? And really, it was just trying to like just to take something, anything that I found I had like some skills in and the desire to really work hard for, and then just really figure out how far or how good I could be at it and really answer that question. So
Hmm.
when I get into kind of a rough spot in a 100 miler now, it's kind of like that's kind of the question I'm asking myself is like, all right, like if you're really gonna figure out how fast you can run 100 miles on these controlled settings, like you got to be able to push through this because you're not going to have a day where you run your very fastest and things just went like super chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, it's kind of just trying to answer that one question for myself. Like, like how fast can I run 100 miles in it, or what time can I run that in these controlled settings? And um, so far, that's been a pretty big draw for me.
Hmm. It's good.
What's getting you out of bed right now in terms of like being excited every day to go for a run? Like what goals do you still have in mind in your career that are like I'm training every day to accomplish this before, I'm done running professionally? Like what's getting you out of bed these days?
Yeah, I'm really curious about just the different training strategies and just approaches outside of the actual training too, like the nutrition
Okay.
side of things. So,
Hmm.
um, I always like trying to tinkering with that stuff, and that's pretty motivating for me just to see like, all right, outside of just I mean, even outside of that, like just the whole development process of like, okay, I'm gonna have this race on this date. These are the things I want to try to do, build like a scaffolding around it, and then kind of navigate that with the intent of like this isn't gonna end up exactly the way it is on paper, but if I can get this directionally correct, I'll be in a good position. And then kind of seeing that development occur through those different stages, that really gets me excited.
Nice.
And I mean, now it's just like there's just so much innovation in the sport. Running in general between the shoe tack and the nutrition and fueling strategies and things like that. I think all those things are kind of levers that I'd like to kind of keep playing around with. I mean, especially the shoes too, because like when I ran 11:19, I didn't wear super shoes for that race, so I feel like with a similar performance, I could probably run a little bit faster just with some of the premium foam tech out there right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a motivator too, knowing like if I can replicate that race with just a little better equipment, I might be able to get a faster time just from that, and then see how much faster that could be.
What shoes did you wear?
What's the
You're-
time adjustment for super
Yeah,
shoes?
that's a great question, actually. So I'll answer both of those. The shoe I wore was this. It was a shoe it was by Ultra Footwear. They're called the Solstice. It's now a gym shoe, so you wouldn't wear it for run.
Zero drop, man. That's aggressive.
Yeah, it was basically a racing flat, like an old school
Yeah.
marathon racing flat. Yeah, I think it was like maybe 15 millimeter midsole or something like that. Very light shoe. And like early in my career, I favored really low profile shoes because I thought like I could get an advantage by building up the strength to tolerate them. Because a lot of ultra runners, even before premium super shoes, were wearing relatively heavy, high cushion shoes just out of necessity to
Yeah.
get to the distance. But I thought, you know what, if I can find a way to make these racing shoes work for 100 miles, then that might be a relative advantage that people might not be able to get away with, and I will. So that was kind of how I ended up in that spot in the first place. And then all of that ended up kind of getting flipped on its head now, where a racing shoe now is like as close to 40 millimeters as you can get it. And that's how you're going to
Yeah.
get the most efficient shoe. So it's kind of a different game with that. But yeah, so playing around with that stuff. And then from a transit, I actually asked, you guys know Jeff Burns?
I think so. Let me look at my
I
phone.
don't.
He's
Chris knows everyone, but
Okay.
me and Danny know about 50% of people.
He's one of the guys that has done a lot of the super shoe efficiency testing and things like that over the years to kind of validate. He's up in Colorado
need to get him
Springs
on
at
the
the
pod.
Olympic training facility now. Yeah, he'd be a great guest.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, if you guys want to deep dive super shoes, he's your guy for sure. Yeah, and I just asked him one day, I was like, what do you think that the translation would be? And he said, like, I mean, we're really extrapolating going out to 100 miles because, you know, now it's an extrapolation going out to a marathon. So now you're almost 4Xing that. But he said it's probably somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes if you respond reasonably to it. So,
Brother.
yeah.
So you're talking about breaking 10 hours, possibly.
11. But yeah.
Breaking 11 hours.
Yeah.
Getting into 10 hours. Sorry.
Yeah.
The words sometimes are a little hard for we talk about like playing around with different training and nutrition stimulus. I went back to the Joe Rogan podcast, the first podcast you were on, and you were talking about ketogenic diet for ultra. Are you still keto, or are you introducing more carbs now? I know that you weren't totally carb less.
Right. I was low carb, not quite strict ketogenic. So yeah, it's probably about 8 or 9 months ago at this point, I switched to high carb just to see if I could try some of these really high fueling stuff. Cause like when I broke that record, I think I took in like 40 grams of carb per hour.
Wow.
And based on my like metabolic card testing, that's about what I would have needed at the pace I was targeting.
Mhm.
So that entire protocol was built on basically just defending like carb oxidation rates. Whereas I think now what we're learning is if you can get away with the digestibility, which I think was a big hurdle earlier in ultra running, which is now we've new products, better training approaches with it. We're seeing guys consistently get over 100 grams per hour. So now all of a sudden that's not really a limiter to any large degree, or if it is, it's one you need to solve. So it was kind of one of those things like similar to the shoes. It's like, okay, I've got to figure out a way to make this work if I want to try to like eke out a little bit of an advantage from it. So for the last almost year, I've been kind of doing the high carb stuff. I actually did a 100 miler at the end of last year. First 100 miler I'd ever done on high carb. I was low carb for 14 years up to that point.
Wow.
And I ran 11:40 48, and I think I hit like 95 grams of carbs per hour. So still a work in process, but it's been fun to play around with.
What's your opinion on like natural, like real food gels versus like, I don't know if lab created is the right term. I can't think of the right term, but like a Morton gel, right? Like glucose
Yeah.
fructose
The
mixture.
maltodextrins of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what's your opinion? Because I know my understanding is that a real food gel maybe is higher risk of stomach issues.
Mhm.
So that's why I use in marathons, because we primarily do marathon on like the guys that host this pod do. So I'm curious, what do you like to use, real food or the lab created gels?
Yeah, I think the faster you're running or the larger your workload per hour is, the more you have to go more engineered.
Yeah, engineered.
So yeah, I mean, like my workload during a 100 mile is going to be like 800 to 1,000 calories per hour. So
Yep.
if I'm looking to hit even like 50% of that workload with carbohydrate, I'm going to probably need to be getting into some of the more refined maltodextrin, fructose blend type stuff.
Yeah.
The bigger question is probably like the 2-to-1 versus 1-to-0.8 ratio of that when it gets into that. But the position paper for single day ultra marathons is some combination of sports products and solid foods, because the average ultra runner, like a big goal in ultra running is like, can you break 24 hours for 100 miles? And a lot of times it's on a trail race, a trail course, so that's probably a little bit of a
Right.
higher workload than you'd imagine for what would be required for just over 4 miles per hour. But when you're going at that intensity, I think then you probably do want something a little bit slower acting and less kind of real hit to the system, because um, you got to do it for a longer period of time, and the lower intensity is just not something you need to be overriding the carbohydrate side of your metabolism as much.
Yeah.
I want to just point out something that you might have missed, but this is back to 2019. Zach setting the 100-mile record in flats and on the keto diet, whereas now 2026 Zach is like super shoes and high carb. Where do you think that the sport of ultra is going, or just running in general? Like, what are the things that we're going to see in the next like 10 years that you can see? Like, what are some of the early adopted things maybe in the sport?
I mean, the most exciting thing, because I'm a fan of the sport too, and
Yeah.
just like I've really gotten in kind of the history of it as well over the years. And the thing I really like about it is I'm a huge fan of competitive pressure being just like the gold standard of just showing us what works and what doesn't work. Is like if you apply enough competitive pressure when the only goal is performance, you just cannot get away with doing something wrong, or you'll get teased out, because there's just enough people who are going to do it right that are going to leverage that variable, and everyone's a percent away from one another. So you can't afford to be weak in an area. And ultra running is kind of getting closer to that now. So, like, I mean, I think this is one of the things where we've gotten a little closer with the fueling side of things, where at least on the men's side, I think it's getting more convincing that it's going to be really tough to win like the real big competitive races like Western States or UTMB if you're not hitting, pretty high amounts of carbohydrate per hour.
Yeah.
So to the degree, I'm not sure how much more that can move. We're already getting pretty high. With respect, we're kind of getting close to, I mean, no one's really as close to the cyclists, just because they kind of have a relative advantage of not having the same jostling impact. But
Yeah.
we're getting pretty close to the marathoners, or maybe even a little past the marathoners to some degree. But there could be some movement there in terms of like what is the exact target with that. Or just maybe as a whole body of sport, figuring out exactly what's going on with these like higher than oxidation rate levels of carbohydrate, where you get someone like David Roche taking 150 grams per hour.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't require that from just an oxidation defense standpoint, but he may be getting a benefit from it. We've got pretty good data to suggest going from 30 to 60 to 90 to 120 provides additional benefits. So
Steve Magnus just had a good tweet storm about this. How
yeah.
the impact of the carbs touching your tongue like lets your body kind of release more glycogen in your system. Maybe like it basically lets your brain provide more energy to your muscles, because your brain knows that you're getting more fuel, even if your body isn't oxidizing it.
Yeah, and in a sport where so much of it is like you're so far below your like top end of the aerobic intensity spectrum. A lot of it does become, how do I create the durability to still maintain the pace I started with? And then part of that is just staying mentally sharp enough to like believe you can do it and stay focused versus feeling like, like, okay, I gotta let go and kind of giving up on things. So if it's powering that at all, I think that's super potent. But I mean, there's a bunch of other cool stuff too where um I mean, people feel different ways about this, but like some of these events now, you have so much access to support where,
Yeah.
Mm,
like at Western states, you can have like a crew of multiple people at like most of the major aid stations. And
Yeah.
I mean, we got like full ice water submersion type situations and much better cooling strategies.
Yeah.
I mean, to the degree, the best example of this is probably Killian Jornet. He won Western States in 2011, ran like 15, right around 15 and a half hours.
Nice.
And he goes back this last year and does it again. This time he ran, I think it was like 14:20 or something like that. So he was an hour and 10 minutes faster. And it's unlikely that he's an hour and 10 minutes more physiologically capable than he was
mhm,
back then. It's just better fueling strategy, better training techniques, better cooling strategies, and
Yeah.
all these things that kind of help with like getting you to the finish line a little bit quicker. So, in a sport that has that many variables outside of just your fitness and your training, there's just so many. There's like almost an endless list of potential in terms of what can move the sport forward if people start leveraging those and finding out what they are, or even just getting better at doing the ones we do know about.
Dude, with
yeah.
how fast they're running at Western states nowadays, people are going to start ripping bicarb at the start.
Yeah.
Dude,
So
I've seen videos of world tour cyclists like eating bicarb like mid race.
Nice.
So yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think David Roche takes bicarb during his 100 milers. I don't know
does
if
he
anyone
really?
else. I'm not. I'm sure other people do too. I haven't heard any
Yeah.
stories though. So.
dang,
I
high
could see
risk.
it if you're a cyclist, you're about to go up a big climb or something. You
Yeah.
take the
That's when I do
bicarb,
it. Yeah,
yeah, 20 minutes before
I
or
mean,
whatever.
it could even just be the sodium loading too, to some degree,
Mm,
yeah.
where like especially if you're taking it to at the beginning of the race. Uh, you're basically, you have the situation with ultra running that's really interesting where you're probably going to be I don't even know if it's probably. I think if it's not like really cool, you're going to be some degree of dehydrated at the finish line. I don't think it's your processing rates aren't going to probably allow you to stay on top of that. Although with the cooling strategies now, that might be something you could consider. But it's one of those things where like perfection is probably like off the table to begin with for the most part. So if you get situations that allow you to kind of optimize that a little bit better than you would before, then it probably matters to a decent amount, especially at the end of the race. So, if you're getting in these
yeah.
things that are just holding on a little bit of extra fluid early on in the race, that could be consequential.
Have you
Zach,
toured with bicarb? Okay, sorry.
I'm curious what your training for your races are for, like, say you're going for a PR in the 100 miler. What are the nuts and bolts of your training look like? Like,
Mhm.
take a 30,000 foot view, right? It doesn't have to be that specific in workouts, but what is the nuts and bolts of your training?
Yeah, so like the foundation, what I'll try to do is I usually have a pretty big aerobic foundation at this point, unless I've had an injury or something that kept me from kind of putting in just easy running and things like that. So that's more or less accounted for going into any kind of, all right, I picked a race, now it's time to start putting the plan together. So once that's there, I'm going to be doing the things I consider important, but from least specific to most specific is kind of the way I break it up. So since my race target that I'm optimizing for is around aerobic threshold, usually that is some version of like short intervals targeting kind of velocity at VO2 max or near there. I'll usually start with like a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, and try to develop that earlier in the plan. And then I'll mostly phase that out and then move into just longer intervals that are a little bit closer to like lactate threshold,
Mm-hmm.
and do a series of those. Usually a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio is a decent starting point for those for me. And I'll ride that out for a bit. And then when I get to that last phase of the training plan, then I start trying to focus, like trying to stack as much volume as I can tolerate close to my aerobic threshold. So like tons of volume, like 150-mile training weeks sometimes. And I'm usually running in the mid 6-minute pace for a huge chunk of that. And most of the training load is coming from that at that point. I'll usually keep like at least one speed session or some like interval session in during the week, but I'm trying to be very careful that that doesn't interfere with my ability to put in some longer runs on back-to-back days in a lot of cases, and keeping that pace down in that like mid 6 range, high 6 range for a good chunk of it.
What is your hardest long run day?
Yeah, historically, it's usually been like between 3 to 4 hours or around 30 miles. Um, that seems to be one where I don't know that I get a whole lot of benefit pushing beyond that. And if I do feel like I can get more value, it tends to be, in my opinion, better done through like a 2 a day, or like a two run cycle where it's like a Saturday, Sunday,
Yeah.
30 Saturday, 30 Sunday, or something similar to that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, the back-to-back
I mean,
long runs are. I, I've coached a few people that do ultra, and that's like for especially people that have never really done ultra before, or like traditionally lower mileage people. I
Mhm.
like going that route, like where I do like 20 and 12 instead of having them do like just 30 miles straight if they're training for like a 50 or something. I feel like that's a safer route for them to
Mhm.
maybe avoid injury, but still get like a, you know, good amount of mileage in within like a 30-hour, time period. So,
Mhm.
uh,
There are people who've played around with longer solo runs. I mean, when Charlie, when he broke the 100K American record in December, I wanna say he did like a 40-mile long run at like, I think he was like 6:05 pace or something for that, or something close. So, I mean, that's a massive training load for a single session.
yeah.
Um, but if you time it right, I mean, I usually look at these things as, okay, there's probably a value to either way, but which one is gonna come with a bigger opportunity cost that is gonna likely make it less likely that I'm able to put in a larger amount of training stimulus over a longer period of time. And I find, like, if I do things like, usually for me, it's I'm jumping in a race or something like that if I'm getting up above 30 miles by any meaningful amount. And usually when I'm doing that stuff, it's like I'm pulling away from enough training that it's, when I look at it from a macro sense, it's like I probably had a lower amount of training load in that time frame. So I think it can be useful if you drop it in there occasionally, especially if you feel like you just need to get that sort of mental rep of being out a little bit longer, or you're testing something new that it could be problematic later in the race and you just want to get it out there a little bit longer. I just usually suggest if someone's going to do that, they give themselves a little bit of a longer timeline so they can absorb that situation without it being an opportunity cost that they have to worry about.
Hmm. How many years would you say you've been putting in 100-mile weeks regularly?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, I'm almost always hit between 4,500 to 5,500. I probably had a year or two where I was under that, but I've been pretty consistently up in that neighborhood since probably at least 2011, 2000, right around 2011. So I'm probably about 15 years. That's close to 100 miles per week on average.
Do your legs hurt?
Yeah.
They do during the big training blocks, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Genuine question. I
Yeah,
mean,
here's what I've noticed. I noticed, like, because 'cause I'm 40 now, so, like, the last 5 years, I find that if I'm just out there pounding mileage, like, I have a lot more aches and discomforts and just kind of like, "Okay, I
yeah.
gotta get loosened up," and things like that. But if I stay on top of, like, strength work and, like, mobility stuff, soft tissue work and things like that, I can pretty much replicate a pretty similar state of how I feel, as I did when I was younger. But, that's a lot of extra work to do that I didn't have to do in my 20s and early
Yeah.
30s.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
Do you think there's any like long term, like what would you say to someone if they said like, like you got to be careful, like running as far as you have been for all those years? Do you think there's any like long term negative effects? Because maybe asking for myself,
Mhm.
I
I was
run,
gonna say, are you asking for a friend?
yeah, I run 100-mile weeks regularly since I don't know for like maybe 9 years now or something since college, and yeah, so maybe I'm asking for myself, but do you think there's any like future negative effects from just pounding 100-mile weeks for years and years and years?
Yeah, I would imagine I've probably crossed the point of like, all right, I've extracted all the health benefits from running, and now I'm creating like a little bit of an uphill battle for things. There's just got to be something that I actually think it's probably less to do with the 100 miles as it is what could I be doing otherwise with that time just to create a more durable body. So like if I was running 50 miles a week and then was in the gym an hour a day, then or doing some sort of like some more directional movement type of sport or something like that, that's probably better like for long-term health and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's always examples of people just kind of keep grinding and don't seem to be really wearing down from it. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I mean, who knows too? It's like we're actually in a pretty unique position too because access to nutrition and proper training strategy and recovery and things like that have never been better. So who knows? Like people who've wrecked themselves doing that sort of stuff in the past, they may have just been victims of just you know not having those things available to them, and now they pay for it a little bit more versus who knows? In 10 years, maybe we don't have to worry at all about that stuff because there's some sort of like protocol in place that you can use to help with like degraded like ligaments and tendons and things like that.
Yeah.
Would
They,
you say that? Go
Brian
ahead.
Johnson's gonna be
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
he's the pioneer of that stuff. Have you talked to him at all?
I haven't. No.
Yeah, he would be super interesting. He's the don't die guy. If you
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
guys have heard of them,
uh,
Scotty and Chris.
I
yeah,
have
yeah.
not.
He's
Oh,
like
Yeah.
a
Okay.
I think there probably are like great ways to reverse a lot. Like I mean, Mark Sisson is
yeah.
probably a good example of this because he was a hard charging guy when he was younger, like did triathlons and things like that, the huge training volume and stuff like that. And he eventually got to the point where he stopped and just started focusing on more functional movement and things like that. And now he's in his 70s and he moves great. So it's like it didn't destroy him. He stopped obviously and started doing other things. So I think like yeah, I mean maybe like if you get to a point where you're no longer interested in putting in that sort of training and
Yeah.
switch to something that's a little more diverse, then a lot of those issues reverse themselves or potential issues reverse themselves.
Zach, if you strapped on a pair of super shoes, hit the roads, could you run 2:15:59 and make the Olympic trials in the marathon?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, that's probably getting pretty close to the way I would probably look at that is if I had wanted to do that, I probably would have had to make the marathon the same project that I did the 100 mile. So had I in my mid 20s been like, all right, I really want to just optimize for the marathon and I'm going to take the next 10, 15 years to do that. I think if you had given me that scenario with super shoes, I could have gotten down to that, but I don't think that would be the case for me any longer.
I don't know, man. You have a lot of lifetime miles. Like it's hard for me to think that like Jim Walmsley's out running 63, 64-minute halves and I can't. I mean, Jim's, obviously a legend, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I would, Jim's one I do wonder about if he had been as motivated to do the marathon
Yeah.
as he was the ultra stuff. Cause yeah, I mean, I think he's probably a sub 210 guy at least with super shoes.
Thank you to Kalo for sponsoring the podcast. We now have a 10% off link in the show notes for you to try your own Kalo Current Smart Ring. Marathon training is simple. Train to your fitness level, go easy on easy days, and push hard on hard days, and never skip your long runs. But how do you really know if you're getting the most out of it without a clear view of how your body's responding? That's where the Kalo Current Smart Ring comes in. Engineered by Kalo, the pioneer in silicone rings for hardworking, active lifestyles. I've been wearing my gold Kalo Current Slim Ring for about 6 months now during my training, and it gives me the clearest picture of my movement, vitality, and sleep compared to any other health tracking device I've tried. By focusing on these metrics, I can easily spot if I'm overtraining or nailing the right intensity for marathon prep. The app's sleek design turns all that data into something super digestible so I can tweak my training on the fly. Plus, for all the marathon moms out there, the Kalo app includes fertility tracking and stroller activities. Head to kalo.com, that's QALO.com to grab one.
Well, one of the races, I love this thought experiment is like, if you could go back and have a race redone with a few tweaks and changes, what would have happened? Jim Walmsley, when they did that Carbon 2 project, where he ran 609, or was it? Yeah, it was 609 for 100K. He was wearing like obviously the Carbon X2, which turned out to be like I think it actually tested below the control shoe.
Yeah, it wasn't
There's like
a great shoe. Like
yeah,
I've
no
heard several
disrespect to
people
Hoka.
say
I
that.
think they've got some great products. I think their super shoes have probably come a long way
They
since then.
have.
But
Yeah.
but that particular model was not it. And if he would have had on a pair, you know, anything basically that was testing in that 3 to 4% range at that time, I think he's probably looking at maybe dipping under 6 hours that day. So that's one I always
Dude.
wonder about.
Dang, I remember. Yeah, I watched that. That was awesome. They made a huge deal about that.
It was a great production. Yeah,
Yeah.
if they would have had him slide on some Nikes, maybe.
They had some that Japanese guy show up to that too, I think, if I recall. So yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. I actually had Raj Panu on the podcast.
Oh,
He was there.
nice.
I think he ran like something in the 620s, I think, that day. So he got overshadowed by Jim's race, but he ran a pretty great 100K split on that one. So
Wow.
Yeah, Raj is a beast. You've had two. I was looking at your pod today. You've had two back-to-back epic episodes. You had Raj and then Jonah Rosner on.
yeah,
I bet.
yeah.
I bet
Oh,
Jonah was
Jonah
awesome,
Rosner.
dude. Yeah,
Jonah's great. Yeah.
he knows a lot about carbs, man.
I know. I feel like he's the type of guy I probably need to just pick one topic and then knock out an hour and a half on that topic and then have him on like 3 or 4 more times with a
Yeah.
different topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've had a couple people on the podcast that we do that with. We're like, man, we have so much more to talk about.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. It was.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was on the Jonah Rosner pod. One thing that was interesting that was posed was if like the high carb intake is like unhealthy for you because it could cause like pre-diabetes levels, like all the sugar you're taking in.
Dude, I've thought about this.
I was like, that's such a valid question to ask because it's like, man, when I'm doing 100 grams an hour after a race, I feel just like awful.
Yeah.
After doing that, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it is an interesting question too, because now that we have a better idea about how trainable the gut is, now you're incentivized not to just like, all right, I'm just going to do this on race day and I'll probably be fine because a few races a year isn't going to probably be a big difference in the grand scheme of things. But now if you're doing that, like every long run, 50 plus times a year, you know, like who knows, maybe that would be a consequence there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think the bigger issue with that stuff really though is just how do people scale away from it when they don't need to do it anymore versus the immediate impact of it itself. Someone did raise an interesting point though too, where what was it that they said? You could have a situation maybe where you're just more likely to drive overtraining syndrome with it's almost like a reverse where if you underfuel, you can get to overtraining, but if you find a way to like optimize fueling to such a degree, you're able to push your body beyond what you would normally be able to tolerate. Can you kind of put yourself in a window where now you're putting in such insane training that it backfires on you and you overreach on that end? I could see an argument there, but I mean, we're really getting into like the very right. Yeah. At that point.
Zach, what are the symptoms of overtraining? I think I've probably overtrained a couple times for some marathon blocks, but I never know. I've always heard it's really difficult to overtrain, but I don't know when I am.
Yeah. I think you probably have to. You probably have to push through quite a bit of discomfort to get to the point. I mean, if you have like, it's probably a pretty ill-defined thing at the end of the day, but you get some cases of it where it's like people are going months and months afterwards where they're still feeling totally wrecked, high resting heart rate. Usually there's probably some markers in something off with respect to like their iron, things like that potentially. And they're just digging themselves out of a pretty deep hole. I think most people are probably more likely to be just like kind of overreaching where, all right, I just need to kind of shut it down for a couple of weeks and slowly build back over the next 4 and you're probably fine. Like just a good off season essentially, is maybe the more likely situation.
What's kind of bouncing off that topic? What's your post race like rest protocol after like an A race 100 miler? Like how long do you take off? What are you doing after the race?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do 2 weeks unstructured, which it can be completely off from running if I feel like I need it, if the motivation isn't there. If I'll more often than not, I will do some running in that, but it's just like, "Alright, I'm gonna go for an easy run and just kinda see how things feel, and if it starts being unfun, I'll just stop." And then after that, I spend about the next usually 2 to 4 weeks kind of building back up to my average training volume. And between the really unstructured couple weeks and the 2 to 4 weeks of just kind of gradual build back up, I feel like that usually gives my body enough chance to kind of absorb everything
Mm.
and not lose too much fitness in the process either. I like the slow ramp up better than like a long period off and then a rush back to things because I find that usually helps preserve a little bit more of the fitness from the prior training load, but still gives you the rest and recovery you need from everything that went into the last cycle.
Yeah.
I'm curious of what you think of the loss of training and how quick or loss of fitness and how quickly that happens. Because I've heard like all over the board. My personal experience is, I had a coach. He like taught me how to run, and he was a big fan of. It takes a while to lose fitness, but truly, I think you lose it a lot quicker than you think. I think it comes
Mhm.
back quick
Yeah.
if you have a great base, but I do think that you lose fitness very fast. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially if you remove the stimulus altogether. If you remove the stimulus altogether, I think you actually do see pretty noticeable loss in a fairly short period of time. But like you said, I think it comes back quite quick
Yeah.
comparatively, at least. I think where it gets maybe a little more gray is what is the input required to maintain. So, like, it's going to take more to acquire something than it is to maintain it. So, if someone puts in a bunch of work and acquires a certain type of fitness, they should be able to kind of back off a little bit and maintain that for the most part. Um, as long as what they're doing is specific enough to what they're trying to optimize. Um, but I also think it's probably going to be intensity based too, where the higher you go up on the aerobic intensity spectrum, the quicker you're going to lose it. So things like short VO2 max type intervals, those are things like if you take time off from that, you're probably going to notice the difference pretty quickly versus like your pace at your aerobic threshold. I think that's probably going to be a lot more durable and is
Yeah.
probably going to stay intact with a lot more indirect type things. So, you know, I it's probably something where, like, if you're doing things that raise your heart rate to some degree, you're just more likely to get close to that intensity without really trying to force it. It's like people aren't accidentally doing VO2 max intervals, but they might, like, go for a bike ride or something like that and end up getting some low intensity cardiovascular fitness, preservation and things like that. So,
True.
I usually look at it that way where the things that take the longest to develop are probably gonna be things that remain a little bit more durable, and
Yeah.
a lot of that low end aerobic stuff is the longer time stuff, and the higher end intensity stuff is the shorter term stuff.
It's a good rule of thumb. Yeah. I
Dude,
like that.
the story as old as time is like the college athlete who, is ripping track workouts, getting ready for track season, then they get on the roads, start, abusing that, not hitting the track as much, not doing
Yeah.
as much VO2. And then, first couple road races, still got my college fitness. Year
Yep.
goes by, I guess still got some there. And then like 18 months, okay, like, yeah, like my 5K shape is, or like the VO2 stuff is gone. So yeah, that's if you don't use it, you lose it for sure. Over time, I experienced that. That's me. So
It is interesting depending on what you do at that time though too, because I know because like you're gonna preserve high end stuff to some degree too if you do enough low intensity stuff. So, like, take me for example, like when I got done with college, I was pretty tired of doing intervals. So I
yep.
basically didn't do intervals for the better part of a year plus after that. But I ran on average probably 30% more volume than I had been for through the kind of the back end of my college career. So I was able to hold on to quite a bit of just like fitness at the higher end of the aerobic intensity spectrum, I think, from that. But had I just been like, if I had I taken off running for a period of time or just reduced my volume, I think I probably would have lost that a lot faster. But that's just to say, like, I do think like the indirect bleed over that you get from like non-specific intensity, as long as there's enough volume there, can also be a pretty powerful input. But yeah, when you start getting to sharpening type stuff for like a 5K, you got to do it. You can't kind of get away with it, I don't think, with just miles.
Believe it or not, you can do VO2 max stuff.
Accidentally?
No, well,
Yeah.
I did a whole block on an elliptical once.
Did you?
Yeah, I ran a 242 off of essentially like all elliptical. I think I ran like 150 miles total during that block.
Oh, nice.
On the road. My Achilles at the finish line, it was a Houston Marathon. My Achilles I think I almost ruptured both of them because my body was just like, what is a road? Yeah. But I did multiple sessions. I haven't gone as hard in training since that. Something about like, I was just in this basement dungeon and I blacked out twice on the elliptical. I found a new max heart rate. I literally like tunnel visioned and found myself like I woke up collapsed on the elliptical.
No way. That's awesome.
Yeah, twice.
Kind of awesome.
Yeah, my wife didn't think it was awesome. And it was always like I like ruined the wall next to me during that stint. It was like 10 weeks.
Yeah.
My first and only stress fracture so far, but it was like all sweat and the wall was all ruined. We had to repaint it before we moved.
That is an interesting point though, because I do think cross training has a lot more value than maybe we thought earlier on. And like for me, last summer I had an Achilles issue and I was on the bike exclusively for about a month. And then I started getting curious with that input and thought like, okay, well, as long as I have to be on it, maybe I just keep it in a little more structured once I start kind of building back. And I ended up keeping it in the program for the majority of the training up until I got to my long run development phase. And then I started trying to move all my volume to the roads. But I was thinking like, since like short interval VO2 max type stuff is unspecific to the intensity I'm racing at, like I'm not really worried about the leg turnover and the mechanics of that intensity. Yeah. And I was like, well, I can probably do most of that on the bike if I need to and still get the training effect I'm looking for without the loading and the potential injury risk of that. So I've been doing that. Like this next buildup I'm starting now, or started a few weeks ago technically. I haven't had any injuries or don't have any injuries, but I've been doing a lot of my intervals on the bike because I was like, why risk doing those on the road? I should do at least a portion of that volume on the bike and maybe go into the lower intensity volume base of my training with a little bit less wear and tear.
The cross training aspect is definitely super interesting. Boys, help me remember. It was either Gabby Rucker or Natasha Rogers that did swimming. Which one was it?
Natasha Rogers does like a ton of swimming. Yeah.
She said she just promised, like she just tells herself, she's like, I'm Michael Phelps in the pool for 45 minutes. And she says that she, like, on top of her, 2 to 3 workouts a week, she gets in the pool and she will swim as hard as possible and try and get her heart rate as high as possible in the pool. And she's like, that's just what I've done and it's worked for me. I'm like, wow, that is truly interesting. Yeah.
Do you guys follow any of the triathletes?
Not super closely. I know a decent amount of them, but they're,
I'm
incredibly interesting.
I'm familiar with like Lionel Sanders, Alex Yee, obviously is more an Olympic triathlete, but I'm familiar. Cam Worth, those guys. Yeah.
So. Who are you interested in right now, Zach, in the tri space?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching when I got on the bike last summer. I started watching their YouTube stuff. So I was watching Lionel Sanders and Sam Long's stuff quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it was just I felt like they were doing some higher aerobic intensity thing almost every day. It seemed like I was just like, I don't know how they bounce back from that. And
like Alex Yee comes to running and runs 206 at Valencia.
Yeah.
He ran London, I guess, last spring and didn't quite have that time, but it was, a disappointing, 211 or I forget what he ran, but
yeah,
he's just an animal. I don't know how, but his YouTube series still, he was getting in the pool and like keeping up with his tri stuff. And I think that's so interesting. Like, what do triathletes know that we don't? Like, what are we
Dude,
missing in running? You know,
professional triathletes might be the most impressive athletes. I mean, Christian Blumenfeld is running a 2:20 marathon in like 80 degrees after he just biked for 112 miles or something. I think it's 112, whatever. It's a lot. It's a freaking lot of miles on a bike, and swimming doesn't take that much out of you, but that's incredible in the heat. I don't understand how they're doing that.
Yeah, I actually wonder about that, because I think if you took it just the amount of volume they're able to do because they reduce that impact, I think that just shows us that our cardiovascular system can just withstand a lot more volume than our mechanical system can. Like, we break down physically before we get to that point. And then you start wondering, like, what kind of training inputs could you do that would be useful for running a fast marathon that can get your volume up without adding any additional running. And other than the difference in like a triathlete's build to like like an Olympic level marathoner, like that might be the bigger limiter for them, is in order for them to do the stuff they're doing, they require more upper body strength for the swimming and stuff like that. So maybe the swimming component, I'm sure you could build a program that just kind of threw away any performance goals from a triathlon standpoint, but optimized for just racing a fast marathon. I do wonder what they would do.
I feel like no one does that, because if you're gonna spend that much time swimming and biking, you're like, well, shit, I might as well be a triathlete, man. I could do really well at this. Like, why am I doing all this?
Yeah, you have just like that board that you hold on with your arms, so you don't have to like work your arms at all. You're just kicking the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to do triathlon, but swimming, I can't get into
I know.
it. So.
I'm terrible. I hate it too. That's the other problem.
That was my sport growing up. So one day I will be a triathlete, I promise. But I got to get my kids older first. I can't bike for like 6 hours on the weekend. I just can't.
That's the big bottleneck with that one, is the 30-hour training weeks.
Yeah. Honestly, if I didn't have this podcast, I could probably do triathlon.
That's the holdup right there.
But this takes up all my free time. Yeah,
all of it, dude.
Worse, you got to do a podcast where you can be training while you're recording. Like, the expectation is you're like zone 2 on the bike during the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure the boys would love to hear the bike spinning like the whole time during the podcast.
We're gonna need some new editing software to edit out Scotty's.
AI will take care of that. Don't worry.
Dude, I'd love to. What's up?
I said we are going to do a live podcast during a marathon.
Eventually.
That's the plan.
That's news to me. All right, I'm in.
Are you in, Danny?
Yeah, let's do it.
In. Dude, I'd love to end our time. Quick chat about your podcast. So you have a podcast. It's called the Human Outlier Podcast, correct?
Yeah,
is that right?
Performance Outliers Podcast.
That Human Performance Outliers. I was not correct. I'm so sorry.
Close enough. Human Outlier.
You'll find it if you search my name.
Yes. How did that get started, man? How did that get started? How long have you been going?
Yeah. So it's had a lot of evolution over the years. I started it actually back in, I think it was early in 2018. And it was a little more kind of health and fitness focused versus being running or ultra marathon focused. And I've been super interested in the podcasting world since probably like 2010, 2011, when it first started kind of popping up as options. And kind of always thought, okay, maybe I wanted to do something like that. But at the time, I kind of thought, like, I want something that's maybe a little different than the running stuff, because I was spending so much time doing that in and of itself. It's like, do I really want one more like running based thing to do? So I focused more on like nutrition, just health and fitness and performance in general with that, with a co-host for a while. And then I think it was 2000 and probably 2021, somewhere in there. It just got a little more complicated with the co-hosting side of things in terms of like making schedules work. And, I had my stuff going on. He had his stuff going on. So, he was going to go a different direction. So I still wanted to keep podcasting. And at that point, I kept it to be a little bit more health and fitness based, but then slowly started transitioning more towards like running and ultra running, and then just kind of running in general over the last like 2-3 years. So, I'm pretty much more heavily invested in that space now.
Nice.
So you've
That's
been
awesome.
going. So this is 8 years now, correct?
Yeah.
2018.
Mhm.
Wow.
And so this is the Venn diagram between the Joe Rogan Experience and Life in Stride is Zach Bitter. So we are on the up, boys.
There you go. Your invite's on the way, I'm sure.
Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's coming.
What was it like going on JRE? What is he the same person as on the podcast?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
I think people question sometimes just how casual he is about kind of his curiosities, and even the way he structures it too. Like, you'd imagine a show of that size would have like a full-on operation. I think there's probably more bodyguards at this point than there are necessarily like people helping out with the actual podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is it is one of those things where, like, when I got invited on, actually, he just started following me. I think it was on Twitter. And at the time I was aware of his podcast, but I wasn't like a regular listener.
Yeah.
And so he follows me, and then like a day or two after, I thought that was kind of weird. I was like, I wonder why Joe Rogan's following me. Like, what interest would he have? And then I had like a bunch of friends and former classmates I hadn't talked to in probably over a decade at that point, reaching out to me saying, "You got mentioned on the Joe Rogan Experience."
Really?
So then I looked at that episode, and at the time he was getting interested in like low carbohydrate diets and nutrition, and kind of trying to like troubleshoot. Like, he's thinking out loud on the podcast for the most part. So he's like just like kind of sharing how he's like kind of navigating it. And I had been doing that approach for a long enough time at that point where I kind of knew the pitfalls and what to look out for if you're trying to maintain some sort of performance with it versus using it for like more traditional use cases. And so I just shot him a note and was just like, "Hey, if you ever have any questions about it around workouts and things, that let me know. I've probably made the bigger mistakes already, and I can maybe help you." And he was just like, "Let me know when you're in LA. We'll get you on the show." So I was like, "Okay, well, you tell me when you want me in LA."
No way.
I'll be there this
We'll do
weekend.
this.
Yeah, right. So it actually took a while to get on after that. Just because I think like it's not like he's passing it off to an assistant at that point. It's just working through him. So I had sent him a note, and I think I fell off his radar for a while. And then all of a sudden I got a message from him like a few months later saying, "Oh, sorry, man, I dropped the ball on this. Let me know it works." And that time I was like super prompt to start pin down a date. Yeah, so that was the first time. And the second time I went on after I broke the world record. So
Cool.
Sick.
yeah, that was another one where he had like shared like an article, I think, from like Runner's World or something like that. And then I just shot him a note saying, "Thanks for sharing it." And he's like, "Let me know when you're in LA next." And then I was like, "You tell me when you want me in LA."
I'll be in LA this weekend, Joe.
Right. When's your next opening? So, no, it was a pretty cool experience.
That's so cool. Yeah, he's also super interested in ultra marathoning too.
Yeah.
Just as a sport. He's had so many ultra runners on there, Courtney and Goggins, obviously you, and so many others. So.
Kim Haynes.
Cam's like pretty regular there. Yeah.
Yeah. They just talk about bow hunting though.
Right. I know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Cam is the Venn diagram between ultra running and bow hunting.
Yeah. He is. Yeah.
He makes his life difficult in that way. Yeah.
For sure.
Nice.
How many episodes have you recorded? Do you know?
Yeah, I think I just released 479 last week.
So what's your consistency currently?
About one per week.
Nice. Yeah.
Dude, that
seems manageable. I'd like to do 2 per week, but it seems like whenever I try to do that, it ends up getting to be a little more difficult with maintaining the coaching side of things and then the training side of things, where it's like, okay, now I'm just trying to be decent at 3 things when I need to try to be doing better at all of them. So
yeah. Makes sense.
Respect.
Makes sense. All right.
Totally.
Anything else for Zach, boys?
Dude, thanks so much for coming on the pod. It's awesome to connect finally. And I've been following you for a long time. Huge fan, and keep doing what you're doing, man. Really enjoy your stuff. So
awesome. No, I appreciate it. No, it was a blast chatting.
Yeah. Do you like, sometimes we just know, so we're going to hit it off with somebody. And I know I was like, 10 minutes into the pod, I popped in, but I could tell right when I came in at the 10-minute mark that it was going to be a great pod.
That's when he knew.
that's how you know.
Yeah,
It's always fun having podcasters on a podcast because podcasters know how podcasts work.
Yeah, it's helpful for sure.
It's enjoyable. Yeah. So we really appreciate your time, man.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. 264. Catch you on 265. Peace.
Peace.